Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I was 12 years old when my parents split up, and unlike most kids in that situation, I wasn't devastated. I wasn't torn apart by the news, I wasn't crying into my pillow every night, and I didn't feel like my world had just collapsed. The truth is, I was relieved. My parents weren't bad people, let me make that clear from the start. They just weren't the right people for each other. Their marriage had been like two puzzle pieces forced together, edges grinding, corners bending, never fitting quite right no matter how hard they pressed. I grew up listening to arguments muffled behind closed doors, watching cold silences stretch across the dinner table, feeling the tension in the air even when no one said a word. So when they finally sat me down in the living room and told me they were separating, I didn't cry. I nodded. I remember thinking, finally. It felt like someone had opened a window in a stuffy, airless room. Of course, divorce comes with choices. My biological brother decided to live with my dad while I chose to stay with my mom. People often asked me if it hurt to be split up like that, if I missed having my brother in the same house. And yes, at first it stung. But the truth is, we both knew it was for the best. He was closer to our dad, I was closer to our mom. It was like the divorce rearranged the chessboard of our family, and we each moved to the side we felt most at home. My dad never remarried. To this day, he hasn't. He's dating someone now, a woman I honestly don't like, though I bite my tongue because it's his life, not mine. My mom, on the other hand, started dating about a year after the divorce. At first I was nervous about it, I didn't know what it would mean for us. Would this new man try to replace my dad? Would he try to parent me, discipline me, shape me into something I was? But when I met him, my now stepfather, I realized he wasn't trying to fill a role that didn't belong to him. He was just himself. A little awkward but kind, patient, steady in a way that my father had never been, and he had a son of his own, a boy close to my age. That's where everything shifted for me. While my biological brother was settling into life with my dad, I was slowly growing close to my stepfather's son. At first, we treated each other like strangers forced into proximity, but over time we bonded. He wasn't just some kid whose dad was dadding my mom. He became my friend. We played video games together, did homework side by side, whispered late-night secrets across the room. He became the brother I didn't know I needed, especially since the one I was born with now lived in another household. When my mom announced her wedding to my stepfather, the excitement was real. Not fake excitement, not plastered smiles for the sake of family politics, but genuine, bubbling joy. We were going to be an official family. My mom would finally have a partner who cared for her the way she deserved. And me, I would finally have a stepbrother I could proudly call my brother, not by blood but by bond. The wedding was beautiful. I remember standing there, dressed up, watching my mom walk down the aisle with happiness in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. My dad wasn't there, of course, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the dancing, and the new sense of stability that wrapped itself around our little family. From that day forward, I stopped feeling like I was caught between two broken halves. Instead, I started to feel whole, a different kind of whole. My family didn't look like everyone else's, but it worked. What I didn't know back then was how tangled all of these relationships would become, how the bonds we built would be tested, and how one wedding years later would nearly tear everything apart again. But that's getting ahead of myself, because before the chaos, before the screaming, before the betrayal and the drama, there was happiness, there was hope, there was the calm before the storm. My stepbrother had been dating his girlfriend for 3 years. She wasn't just anybody. She wasn't some girl I'd politely tolerate at family gatherings or smile at across the dinner table. She was my best friend, my person, the one who knew all my secrets, who sat with me on the worst days, who laughed with me until our stomachs hurt. When he introduced her to the family, I almost couldn't believe it. My best friend was dating my stepbrother. It was like the lines of my life had crossed in this perfect, unexpected way. And when the two of them got engaged, I was over the moon, beyond excited. This wasn't just my stepbrother's wedding, it was our wedding. A celebration that tied together every thread of my family and my friendships in one perfect knot. So when they asked me to be the maid of honor, I didn't hesitate for a second. I said yes with tears in my eyes. My biological brother, who by then had grown into his own man living with our dad, was asked to be the best man. That's how close we all were. My stepbrother, my best friend, my biological brother. It felt like a circle that had finally closed, like the universe had conspired to bring us all together. Of course, every wedding has its cast of characters, and in this one there was A. O was my stepbrother's best friend, though for the life of me I never understood why. From the first day I met him, I didn't like him. He had this energy about him, smug, entitled, always just a little too close, a little too interested in me. He'd hit on me constantly when my stepbrother wasn't around, making comments that left my skin crawling. He thought he was charming, I thought he was a creep. I never told my stepbrother though, not because I was afraid for myself, I knew how to shut it down when I needed to, but because I was afraid of what my stepbrother might do if he found out. He was protective, sometimes to the point of recklessness, and if he knew his so-called best friend was bothering me, he might have done something that landed him in handcuffs. I wasn't about to let a ruin that. Eventually, I found himself a girlfriend, and for the first time in years he stopped pestering me. The relief I felt was indescribable. I thought, finally, he's someone else's problem now. I started to think maybe, just maybe, the wedding would go off without a hitch. Planning a wedding is never easy, but the process was surprisingly smooth. Sure, there were stressful moments, the seating chart, the floral arrangements, the catering, but nothing outside the norm. No explosions, no family feuds. Every time we gathered to plan, to taste cakes or pick colors, I felt this warmth. My best friend was glowing, my stepbrother was happy, and even my biological brother looked excited to be part of it all. For once, everything felt right. The closer we got to the big day, the more I started to imagine it. Walking down the aisle as maid of honor, standing by my best friend as she promised forever to the man I considered my brother, hearing the speeches, dancing until my feet ached. It was supposed to be perfect. And it would have been if not for A. Because lurking behind the smiles and toasts, behind the fittings and rehearsals, was a man who thought the world revolved around him. A man who couldn't stand not being the center of attention. A man who would turn the happiest day of my best friend's life into a spectacle no one would ever forget. But I didn't know that yet, none of us did. All we knew was that the invitations were sent, the dress was chosen, the rings were bought, and the countdown was ticking. The wedding was coming, and so was the disaster that would follow. The morning of the wedding felt like waking up inside a dream. The air buzzed with excitement, and every corner of the venue seemed to hum with the kind of joy that can't be faked. I'd been to weddings before, but this one felt different. It was personal. My best friend, the girl who had been there through every secret and heartbreak, was about to marry my stepbrother, the boy who had become my brother in all the ways that mattered. It felt like every piece of my life had come together on this one day. The ceremony was flawless. The sun broke through the clouds just as the music began, lighting up the aisle as though it had been timed by heaven itself. My best friend looked radiant, my stepbrother looked like he couldn't believe his luck, and even my biological brother, who rarely showed emotion, had tears in his eyes. I stood there as maid of honor, watching two of the most important people in my life promise themselves to each other, and I thought, this is it. This is the happiest I've ever been. The vows were spoken, the kiss was shared, the applause thundered through the crowd. For that brief slice of time, everything was perfect. Then came the reception. The venue was decorated with lights strung across the ceiling like stars, flowers on every table, and the sound of laughter spilling through the air. Guests clinked glasses, children ran between tables, music played softly in the background. At the head table we sat like royalty, me as maid of honor, my biological brother as best man, the newlyweds glowing in the center, surrounded by their closest friends. And of course I was there too, seated among the groomsmen. Speeches were given, some were heartfelt, others funny, all filled with love for the bride and groom. When I took the microphone for his toast, I braced myself. His speech wasn't bad, generic but harmless. I thought maybe he'll behave today, maybe even he knows better than to ruin this. I was wrong. It happened out of nowhere. Just as the dinner plates were being cleared and laughter filled the room, I stood up again, grabbing the microphone like it belonged to him. At first, I thought he was about to tell another joke or maybe share a forgotten memory, but then he cleared his throat and said he had something important to announce. Confusion rippled through the room. His speech was already done. What more could he possibly have to say? Then he called his girlfriend up to the table. My stomach dropped. I knew instantly where this was heading. He started rambling about love, about fate, about how they were meant to be together. His girlfriend was smiling, but it was that tight, nervous smile, the kind that says not here, not now. He either didn't notice or didn't care. And then, like we were all extras in his personal movie, he dropped to one knee, pulled out a ring, and proposed. Gasps filled the room. Some people clapped out of reflex. His girlfriend said yes, and the two of them jumped around like they had just won the lottery, shoving the ring in people's faces, taking the spotlight that wasn't theirs to take. Meanwhile, my best friend, the bride, sat frozen. Her smile had vanished, her eyes glossy, her hands twisting in her lap. I leaned closer and whispered her name, but she just shook her head, blinking fast as though trying not to cry. At the head table, my stepbrother and my biological brother leaned toward each other, whispering furiously. Their jaws were tight, their eyes fixed on alike. They could set him on fire if they stared hard enough. Finally, my mom, God bless her, stood up. She walked to the front, took the microphone, and reminded everyone firmly but calmly that this was her son's wedding day, that the celebration was for the bride and groom and not for anyone else's engagement. For a moment, silence fell, people nodded, order was restored. And then the screaming started. A's girlfriend let out this banshee wail, accusing my mom of ruining her special day. Her special day? At someone else's wedding. She shrieked, she cried, she stomped her feet like a child. And A, instead of calming her down, he exploded too. He started shouting about how he hadn't done anything wrong, how we were selfish for not being happy for him, how love should be celebrated no matter the time or place. The crowd turned, guests whispered, some looked embarrassed, others angry. And then, like the disaster it was, A and his girlfriend were escorted out. Their big moment had ended in humiliation. My stepbrother lost his so-called best friend that day, but the truth is he didn't care. None of us did, because in trying to steal the spotlight, A lost everything: his friends, his respect, and his dignity. The rest of the night carried on, but the mood had shifted. People tried to ignore what had happened, but the echo of that screaming match hung in the air like smoke after a fire. My best friend pulled herself together because she's strong like that, but I could see the cracks. Every smile she forced, every laugh she faked, I could see the pain underneath. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and instead someone else had tried to hijack it. Afterward, the story spread like wildfire through our circles. Everyone had an opinion, but the consensus was clear: A and his girlfriend had crossed a line you can't uncross. They became a punchline, a cautionary tale about what not to do at a wedding. And I'll admit, I was a little petty about it, because not long after, COVID hit and they couldn't even plan their own wedding. All that drama, all that spectacle, and in the end, they didn't even get their special day. Poetic justice, if you ask me. My stepbrother never spoke to A again. My best friend cut ties with A's girlfriend. My biological brother said it best: he was never really your friend, he just wore the title until the mask slipped. As for me, I look back on that day with mixed feelings. It was supposed to be a fairy tale, and in some ways it still was. My stepbrother married the love of his life, my best friend got her happily ever after, and we became a stronger family because of it. But it also showed me something important: people will reveal who they are when they think the spotlight is theirs. And sometimes, the best gift you can give yourself is cutting those people out for good. So yes, the wedding was unforgettable. Not for the reasons we planned, but for the lesson it taught. No matter how much you prepare, no matter how carefully you arrange the pieces, someone will always try to make it about themselves. And when they do, you have a choice: let them ruin it or rise above. We rose above. And I'll never forget the look on A's face as he was dragged out of the reception, realizing he'd lost it all in the span of 5 minutes.